In 1907, the American economy suddenly fell into a financial crisis. Unemployment is rising, the stock market is plummeting, people are starting to panic. Many people are starting to queue up overnight to be able to withdraw their money from the bank. If this crisis phenomenon is left longer, it can certainly be fatal for the American economy. And if this happens, business actors will certainly fire many workers, and the American economy will collapse even more. At the time, the American government had no experience and no way to deal with the panic. No institution or law can take action to stop the decline in the performance of healthy banks. So instead of the government system that completed the task of stopping the panic, fell into the hands of one man, J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan quickly summoned a prominent New York financier to his private library on Madison Avenue. Essentially, J.P. Morgan ordered them to contribute by raising a huge sum of money, which would be used to support the repair system. Then J.P. Morgan locked them in his library and told them to stay there all night, until they all agreed to his plan. Until finally J.P. Morgan's plan succeeded, the panic over the financial crisis of 1907 ended. However, some influential people in Washington wondered, what about the next panic? Do all Americans really want their economic fate to depend on just one rich person in New York? Finally, Senator Nelson Aldrich, as chairman of the U.S. Senate Finance Committee, decided that this was indeed a problem. The senator knew there was something the American people could do to stop relying on one side to end the panic over the economic crisis. And the senator also understands that the financial crisis is certainly not only experienced by America, but all countries in the world. And there was one strong idea in the senator's head, which was the central bank. On November 23, 1910, one night, a group of the most influential people in world finance, one by one, arrived at a train station in New Jersey. At the New Jersey station, they will find private cars in their respective names installed at the back of southbound trains. There were 6 bankers on the train from New Jersey, bound for Georgia. These 6 elite bankers are Nelson Aldrich, Frank Vanderlip, Benjamin Strong, Henry Davidson, Charles Norton, and Abby Andrews. To show how influential these 6 men were in world finance is to point out the fact that these 6 people at the time were people who owned a quarter of the wealth in the world. The invitation to the meeting and the departure plan were all arranged by Aldrich, the senator, even to hide his identity so as not to attract public attention. Aldrich told the bankers to come dressed as a duck hunter, or dress like a duck hunter, and only call each other by their first names. In the train, the bankers headed to Jekyll Island, a luxury club off the coast of Georgia. This place is not a random place. In 1904, Muncie magazine touted Jekyll Island as the richest, most exclusive, and most inaccessible club in the world. No wonder, since its establishment in 1886, Jekyll Island was indeed made specifically to be exclusive and can only be visited by club members, and not just anyone can become a club member. Among the special members, there were elite names such as J.P. Morgan, Marshall Field, and William Kissong Vanderbilt on. Because of the exclusivity and secrecy of this meeting, the wider public only found out about this meeting around the 1930s. It is reported that the meeting that prepared the plan to overhaul the banking system took up to 9 days. They talk about central banks. However, they also know that central banks are not a new invention because countries in Europe already have central banks. And when there is an economic panic, central banks are basically doing what J.P. Morgan did in America, become a last resort by acting as a lender for banks. But still, in the meeting, they continued to consider both important words in their plans. The 2 words are central and bank. These 2 words in all of American history are not the 2 popular words. For this reason, the central bank makes them doubt and causes inconfidence. In addition, the banker is aware that many Americans will think the central bank can be too powerful and can be too influential in the American economy. So they came up with the classic American solution, which was that they decided the United States should form many small central banks scattered throughout the country. And on the 9th day, at the beginning of December in the 1910s, the 5 most influential people in world finance agreed to create the Federal Reserve System, and then proposed as an institution or system in response to most of the financial responses that have ever occurred in America, especially in 1907. But still, the Federal Reserve System was not so quickly accepted. Even in several meetings in Congress, this idea was rejected by many Senate. Nevertheless, the idea of the Federal Reserve System continued to be debated, significantly changed in response to demand, and finally, 3 years later, on December 23, 1913, the President of the United States at the time, Woodrow Wilson, passed the idea of the Federal Reserve System into the Federal Reserve Act. After it was passed into law, the Federal Reserve System finally established its office in downtown New York. The people who run the Federal Reserve System are called the Board of Governors, and the 6 people who came up with this idea are the ones who make up the Board of Governors. After the Federal Reserve System became a legal institution, they immediately carried out their desire to control the center of the monetary system to alleviate the American financial crisis. Because the Federal Reserve System is very independent, because the policies made do not have to obtain permission or approval from the President of the United States, because the world's central bank is more powerful than any politicians, governments, and laws, there is no system outside of him that can control and audit them, not even once a state. A year after it was inaugurated through the Federal Reserve Act, the United States, through its central bank, for the first time in 1914, printed dollars for one country's currency. Because before the Federal Reserve Act, after the establishment of the United States, each local bank could print its own money. For example, as a California resident, legal payments in California cities are in the National Bank of San Diego printed dollars, because most of the spending in America at that time was local, only around California. So the money issued by the National Bank of San Diego will be accepted at local stores in California. So is New York. Local banks in New York have their own printed money from their local banks. For that reason, the National Bank of San Diego's printed dollars in California do not apply to be a medium of exchange in New York. The reverse on the New York print does not apply when spent in California. At this time, each citizen of the city and his local bank had his own agreement and trust in the eyes of the money he printed, which was the means of exchange. So after the Federal Reserve System became the central bank, the dollar, its print, was official and applicable to all regions of the Americas. And it is also here that the lie about money begins. For from here, money can be printed only by the wind, and not only print. The Federal Reserve System can lend the dollars it prints to the American government, either to stabilize or strengthen the economy. As a result, through their system, both the market and the stocks in the world can be made to rise or fall at the time they like. With the flexibility of systems and policies that the Federal Reserve System has, the world's finances can be made upside down as they please. In 1914, World War I broke out. The countries that participated in the war, most of them were countries that still used gold as their currency standard, especially Britain, because in these years, Britain was the most advanced country to maintain the value of a currency that was standardized on gold, and for this reason, Britain has become the leader of the world economy. But during World War I, many countries abandoned the gold standard to be able to pay for their military education. This is all due to the very high cost of war, which drains the state treasury. As a result, countries that left gold standards began to pay their military shopping with banknotes. Because during World War I took place, America became a supplier of war weapons to war that fought. The transfer of currencies from gold standards to paper money also made the currency in these countries experience devaluation or decline in the value of money. The two blocs that fought experienced it, both France, Russia, Germany, even to Turkey, Ottoman. Different from Britain, Britain firmly held on gold standards to maintain its position as the world's leading currency. But after 3 years of war, precisely in 1917, Britain for the first time had to borrow money from America for war costs. Because in World War I, America became a lender for many countries by providing bonds or loans that dominated the value of the US dollar. Finally, until 1919, Britain surrendered to the gold standard to maintain its currency. As a result of the compulsion of this policy, the international trading account based on the post-sterling currency was destroyed. To be with the US dollar, it replaced the post-sterling as a reserves of the world currency. Some decades later, the World War broke out again. Of course, before entering World War II in 1939, America had played a very important role in the world. America plays a role as weapons and other war goods for allied countries. In these years, some payments from countries still pay gold. As a result, before World War II was completed, America became the most gold owner. With the dominance of America for gold ownership, the gold standard policy is no longer possible. Because other countries in the world, including the British, have spent gold as a state treasury reserves. Knowing the facts of transition to gold to the inevitable banknotes, in 1944, delegations from 44 allied countries met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. This international meeting discusses the development of foreign exchange management systems, or official foreign payment instruments, in international trade. This foreign exchange discussion also aims not to harm any country in international trade. After the long meeting was held, the Bretton Woods Agreement was decided, with 44 countries agreed on the coronation of the US dollar as a world reserve currency, or that the world currency was no longer associated with gold, but associated the US dollar. This agreement set the authority of the Federal Reserve System, or the American Central Bank, has the authority to maintain and set the exchange rate of the US dollar with other money that exists around the world. Even other countries in the world, in this agreement, other countries can use their money exchange rates with US dollars rather than gold. The question is, what's the connection? The answer is simple. From the Federal Reserve Act system, the central banks in every state government in the world mimic the American Federal Reserve System. Starting from the European Central Bank to Bank Indonesia, and to this research we have made, there are only 3 countries in the world that do not mimic the Federal Reserve Act system and do not have the central bank in its country, namely Iran, Cuba, and North Korea. However, with a simple correlation from the Bretton Woods Agreement, US dollars officially become the world currency. Central banks in each country, ranging from rupiah, yen, euro, and whatever money in the world, all associated with currency value US dollar. To maintain this currency, a Bretton Woods Agreement system was created, which means that every US dollar money has gold that guarantees behind it. All of this is only because America is a country that holds the biggest gold reserves at the time. After this agreement was determined, instead of reserve, the state is gold. Many countries began to buy US Treasury or securities from the American Ministry of Finance, which according to them are a safer way to store the state treasury. However, in the Bretton Woods Agreement, a fixed benchmark is still carried out that 35 US dollars are equivalent to 1 troy ounce or 31 grams of gold. From this policy, currency or currency value has indeed become guaranteed stability. However, the stability does not last long because in 1971, American finances are battered. Many factors are background. One of the biggest factors is the financing of the Vietnam War, which makes the American economy destroyed. As a result, to cover the country's deficit, the American Central Bank scored dollars and flooded the world market with US dollars. Because the US dollar flooded the international market, the value of the dollar automatically declined, which also had a direct impact on the value of the currency of other countries. For this reason, countries in the world also increased their worries about the stability of the value of the dollar currency, and many countries also immediately spend the dollar American to buy gold and replace the country's cash reserves with gold. On the panic and fears, the demand for gold immediately increases. Increased inflation and decline in dollar prices for the personal interests of America. In 1971, the American president at that time, Richard Nixon, was forced to intervene in controlling the foreign exchange market and decided to end the conversion of dollars to gold. Simply put, starting in 1971, the US dollar no longer has a guarantee of gold. What is the impact? The stability of the value of the currency is immediately threatened and the exchange rate becomes floating. Because of the decision of President Nixon's intervention, which stated the US dollar no longer relied its value on gold, the American government was like asking, or rather forced all countries in the world to trust America with US dollar. Because after the decision was taken, the central bank in the world in the future will be able to print and circulate the US dollar that comes from a vacuum without a guarantee of asset or gold that is adequate and limited. And this is the financial system that happened today. Remember, the World Central Bank is in America, and they can print US dollars as they like. So you can imagine what kind of, in 2021, 40% of the US dollars circulating in the world market were printed only 1 year by the American Central Bank. In that 1 year, the American economy was estimated to have scored $10 trillion. On this policy, and together with the economic crisis, the world currency becomes weak, because the world market is suddenly flooded with US dollars. For the arbitrariness of America, many other major countries, such as Russia, China, even rich countries in the Middle East, began to switch not to use dollars in their trade agreements. For this matter, of course, the European continent has anticipated it first through the Maastricht Agreement, which was stated on February 7, 1992, but reached its peak starting in 2002, stating that all countries on the European continent agreed to uniform their official money using the euro currency. This agreement is known as the Treaty on European Union. The euro currency used by all European countries aims to encourage the growth of currency value stability, and in particular is the integration of the economy in Europe. Well, now the essential question: what determines the value of the currency? Or if we want to philosophy a little, why do humans create money? And why should money? Is there a specific reason why the money chosen in determining the value? Why not natural objects? To answer that, the most appropriate thing is by reflecting on history. At the beginning of civilization, humans did not yet know money to meet their daily needs. Humans realized that needs could not be met alone, and there were limitations in the means of satisfying needs. When faced with such conditions, humans tried to increase the variety of means of satisfying needs by exchanging. In the early stages, humans exchanged goods with goods from people who needed each other. As a result, a barter system emerged, namely goods exchanged for goods. Barter is the exchange of one item for another type of item. Barter also makes people more selective in obtaining goods, so that the quality of the goods can be maintained properly. The barter system can also reduce the social gap between the rich and the poor in life, because in an exchange using this barter method, the requirement must be met in the form of the same desire from the parties involved in the barter. However, equating the desires of the parties involved in this barter is not easy, so the requirement for the same desire is also an obstacle that occurs in transactions using the barter method. To overcome the difficulties that arise in barter trade, of course, humans at that time had the idea of using certain objects to be used as a means of exchange. This medium of exchange is what is then known as money. The objects that are designated as a medium of exchange are objects that are generally accepted. The objects chosen are of high value or difficult to obtain, or have magical and mystical value, or objects that are daily primary needs. The history of money continues to develop because the barter system has many obstacles in its application. Finally, at that time, humans began to apply basic goods that almost everyone had as a standard of payment. The basic goods in question include salt, tea, tobacco, and grains. However, over time, around 9000 to 6000 BC, commodity money was no longer in the form of small objects, but changed into livestock. Then when agricultural culture emerged, commodity money began to shift again in the form of agricultural products such as wheat, vegetables, and other plants. The emergence of the first money in human civilization is still debated because there are several versions whose truth still needs to be proven. Jack Witherford, in the book History of Money, for example, supports the opinion that money was first created and used by the nation or people of the Lydian kingdom. The Lydian nation is thought to have lived in the area that is now Turkey. Money at this time is said to be in the form of coins with a picture of a roaring lion. Witherford believes that the Lydians have known money and used it as a means of exchange since around the year 1000 BC. Donald B. Klein has a different version. In the book Rationality and Human Behavior, Klein states that coin currency was first discovered 6,000 years ago in the area that is now the country of Turkey. However, Klein does not mention the Lydians as Witherford believes. Over time, money made from paper also appeared. Some historians believe that paper money began to be used in the Chinese kingdom in 100 AD. Centuries later, European nations only became familiar with this type of money. That was after Marco Polo, the discoverer of the American continent, returned from his adventures in China. However, if asked since when humans have used intermediaries as a means of exchange to meet human needs, it can be traced back to 1200 BC. At that time, some of the earliest currencies were objects from nature. A famous example is the cowrie shell. Of course, this choice is a random choice. Its nature is like the choice of language, which is arbitrary or at will. However, the basis is still agreement and trust. However, humans at time chose shells clearly for their own reason. These shells have a number of advantages, are similar in size, small and durable. Although the mollusks that produce these shells are found in the Maldives Islands in the coastal waters of the Indian and Pacific Oceans, the expansion of trade made several European countries accept cowrie shells as currency and named them wampum. Shells in the form of wampum are tubular shell beads that were used as money by Native Americans. Another form of natural currency was whale teeth used by the Fijians. And people on the island of Yap, now part of Micronesia, carved large limestone discs that eventually became currency and remain part of the island's culture to this day. Several hundred years later, humans became more advanced and evolved. So did the means of exchange used. In 600 BC, animal skins began to be used as a means of exchange. Ancient Romans in the early days were reported to have used this type of money. Leather money was also found in areas such as Carthage and the area now known as France. The Russian region is also believed to have used leather money during the reign of Peter the Great, as did the Emperor of China. Then in power in 141 BC, this Chinese emperor made currency from white deerskin from his personal collection. This leather money was edged and decorated with intricate designs. Although no longer used, leather money may have left a lasting legacy. Some believe that leather money gave rise to the use of back as a slang for dollar. Along with leather money, metal money began to be used as a means of exchange. According to many historians, in the 7th to 6th centuries BC, the Lydian kingdom of what is now Turkey issued the first regulated coins. These coins appeared during the reign of King Alyattes, who ruled from 610 to 560 BC. These coins were made of electrum, a natural mixture of gold and silver. Roughly shaped like nuts, these coins featured the symbol of the kingdom, the lion. Alyattes' son Croesus, who continued to rule from 560 to 546 AD, decided to reform the kingdom's currency by introducing silver and gold coins. Soon, such currencies began to appear in other places and kingdoms. After evolving from natural materials such as shells, metals, and animal skins, humans made another advance in the history of money as a medium of exchange, by experiencing progress by starting to use paper money. Given that paper is widely believed to have originated in China, it is only fitting that China was the country that introduced paper money. This innovation is widely thought to have occurred during the Tang dynasty in 100 AD. However, if we refer to history, the manufacture of paper money actually began before the Tang dynasty, but failed because it was difficult to find paper material that was durable. It was only when the Tang dynasty was in power that someone named Cai Lun succeeded in creating paper from murube bark. By the late 18th and early 19th centuries, paper money had spread to various parts of the world. However, most of these currencies were not currencies in the traditional sense. Instead, they served as a promise to pay a certain amount of gold or silver, which was key to the development of banking. At that time, paper money was not a tool that had a nominal value, but only as proof of gold ownership. The simple system was that someone who had gold exchanged it with a government bank. The government bank recorded and stored it, and then the government bank would issue paper money containing data on gold ownership in the bank. This paper money was also known as AOU money, which meant that the bank owed the owner of the paper. So the paper money issued by this government bank can be said to be as valuable as gold at that time. Finally, in 1265, the Chinese government of the Song dynasty legalized paper money as the country's currency. However, Several hundred years after paper money was officially legalized as a means of exchange, the government agency that ran the paper money recording experienced a financial crisis because the demand for its money recording was very high. Finally, in 1455, the Chinese government returned to using gold and silver as its currency and continued for almost the next 500 years. It is not surprising that paper currency has a number of problems. Because currency issued based on fiat or sovereign government decisions allows countries to issue their money as they please. And some countries did, and still do, potentially rendering their currencies worthless. This became such a problem that in 1821, Britain, then a leader in international finance, introduced the gold standard. In this monetary system, the standard unit of currency is usually held in a fixed amount of gold, which increases confidence in international trade by preventing governments from issuing too much currency. Surely the question on many people's minds: why doesn't every country just print as much money as possible? Of course, every country does have the authority to print, name, and give value to each of its printed money. But if the question is why countries don't print as much money as possible, whether for the reason of helping the economy or the welfare of its people, printing as much money as possible is not the right solution in the current world economic system. In fact, it could make the economy even more chaotic, because Germany once did it. Here's the story. At that time, the First World War broke out. Germany became one of the countries that participated, and because of its participation, Germany experienced a severe economic crisis. To anticipate the economic crisis, the German government at that time, through its central bank, decided to print money in very large amounts. Well, instead of helping to revive the economy of its people, the decision actually created a boomerang that made the German economy fall even deeper. Why is that? Because the large circulation of money makes the value of the currency decrease, especially when compared to the currencies of other countries. In addition, because the market is flooded with money circulation, automatically the prices of goods also increase drastically. Remember, the basic law of economics is supply and demand. So if the government or entrepreneurs in a country will export or import goods, they automatically need more money. Likewise, to meet local needs in society, people have to work extra to get more money. Because if production costs increase, of course the price of goods also increases. And the company also has to survive extra in getting its raw materials because prices have soared. And if the company cannot keep up with developments, it will certainly experience bankruptcy due to unbalanced demand and supply. Suppose the company does not experience bankruptcy, of course the company will make finance efficient. One of the quick efficiency that will be taken by the company is definitely a reduction in employees. And if this happens, we'll make a massive layoff phenomenon and make more unemployment rates. If this cannot be overcome properly, it will trigger a variety of other chaos. One of them sharpens social inequality. Because if the situation becomes uncontrolled with the prices of goods that rise, the rich group will still be able to buy and meet their needs, while the poor, the more difficult it is to meet their needs. And if this happens, the poor will be angry because of the unfair situation for him. This will have an impact on instability in a country. Of course, there will be demonstrations everywhere. Riots and crime will increase and rampant. Indonesia has experienced it in 1998. Sri Lanka had experienced it in 2022. Or if you want to take extreme samples, of course there are in the Zimbabwe country. Zimbabwe, when experiencing hyperinflation in 2008, made the money circulating a lot until it was not valid and had no value. People in Zimbabwe have a lot of money, but are unable to buy goods. Even then, Zimbabwe until it issued a bills with a nominal of $100 trillion. But still, it doesn't have any purchase price. For mutual connected and mutually dominating from the currency value system from the central bank, printing as much money from a country is not the right solution to strengthen the economy or prosper the people. Proposing as many money as possible actually makes the economy and stability of a country become threatened. And for additional information, money printed and circulating in the community, be it banknotes, metals, or virtuals, the amount is only 3% of the total money available, because the remaining 97% are stored in digital form on the computer network of the central bank system. That money is a manifestation of human trust. For this reason, perhaps the official language of money is fiat, and in Latin, fiat has the same meaning, let it be done, or the simple language is like it is. Or if you are able to say the central bank like you want to say, it's money, and already believe if it is money. Once again, our financial system is the key, is trust and agreement. Well, after you know the financial history and financial system now, maybe now you can understand the controversial statement from Henry Ford, which states, fortunately, people do not understand the concept of banking and monetary system. Because if they understand, I believe there will be a revolution tomorrow morning.